Well, hello. It's a Sunday afternoon and I'm working away at my project today. Last fall, I started a Blockalong. That is, I got a pattern a month from my local quilt guild, and each month I completed a block. And now it's the end of the quilting season, and we're expected to put these blocks together. Well, we got a suggestion for how to put them together, and it's going to be the size of a like 24-inch by 36-inch wall hanging. And I'm not into wall hangings, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with it if it's a wall hanging. So I'm doing a quilt as desired type of thing. You know me, I've got lots of scraps. I like doing quilt as you go. I like using what I've got. So I'm adding blocks to the block along, and I'm making it much bigger, so it's going to be a bed-size quilt. I also want to use what I've got in my stash. So I've got a lot of batting strips, which means I'm going to sew this together using the quilt as you go technique. I've got a lot of scraps, and I don't know what I was thinking of when I picked out the fabric in the beginning, but I'm looking at it on my wall right now, and boy, I need sunglasses because it's bright. It's bright. It's really bright. Anyway, I'm going to show you what I'm doing. Here I go. I decided to use a medallion style, so I picked the big square, added a border around it so that those strips that we made would fit around the sides. And I liked the way that looked. Then I had one of those yellow circles, oval sizes, and if I made 3 more, it would fit along one side. So that's what I did. I also made sure to make them a little bit extra long, because then I decided to put those leaf patterns or pathway patterns along one side as well. And I put it at the top, and that's pretty good. And I quilt each section individually so that I can join them together with the previously quilted sections. It's always fun to try out new things. If I wanted to do something other than straight line quilting, I could easily free motion stitch these blocks. They're big, they're interesting. I could do sort of a leaf pattern in the center, do some meandering, do something very very special. But I'm into doing straight line quilting, and I just use the measuring bar that comes with my sewing machine so that I can keep the rows parallel to each other. I always like a diagonal line. I think it gives a little bit of interest rather than horizontal or vertical. But whatever I need to do, I will try it and think about it differently. When I have these scrap quilts, I have 2 favorite colors of thread that I use to machine quilt. One is a limey green color, and that's what I'm using on this section. The first section I made was a bit darker, and I have a kind of purpley magenta color of thread that I use as well. And you know, I like the way that those 2 colors blend with a lot of the fabrics that I have. This particular quilt, I could go just about anywhere except black or white, and it would be fine. And I am using a black patterned fabric on the back side. I have quite a few black based pieces that are quite big, and I can use them because as I get farther out from the center of this quilt, it's going to require longer strips that I need to piece together to put in the border areas of this quilt. And anyway, it only took me about 5 minutes to quilt this section using diagonal. And it's just easy. It's easy on my hands. It's easy on my shoulders. It's quick. If I need to take something out, it's not very much that I have to take out. So I'm all for doing this quilt as you go stuff. But that's done. I'm going to trim it now. So I lay the quilt piece on my cutting table. I can trim both ends first. These blocks are 12.5 inches unfinished. So it's an easy slice across there. Not much waste in this kind of quilting. A little bit of a strip at the end that I use to do my back stitching. And when it comes time to do the lengthwise part, it's 48 inches. And so I have to just be kind of careful not to stray too far off of the edge of the quilt. When I get the first side trimmed, then I can use the cutting table a lot easier and put one edge up against the marking on the ruler of the cutting board. I tend to use that a lot when I am trimming things. I will place it up against one straight line, and then I can see the top and the bottom measurement, and I will use that to be able to trim the other side. It doesn't take very long to trim these pieces, and then I just need to stitch them together with the previously quilted sections. I love medallion quilts as well. You start in the center, you work your way out. Each piece gets a little bit longer, a little bit wider maybe, but it uses up the strips of fabric that you have after you make a big quilt and you have to cut a piece of batting. It might be 18 inches, it might be 6 inches, but I hate to throw those away, and I always try to make these medallion quilts or make, what would you call it, row quilts. Row quilts are great too. You could just make a straight row of houses, a straight row of trees, join the rows together with quilt as you go method. It's just a lovely, lovely way to use up things. All right. Now it's time to make the piece of joining fabric to join that strip to the previously quilted part. On the top side, I pick something that is going to coordinate with the scrappy quilt that I've made. And I look through my strips bin, and I look through my scraps and find something that is appropriate in color, in texture, whatever. You know, you have to have something that's kind of decent. And this was a 2.5-inch strip, but I'm trimming it down just a little bit because it's a bit too wide on the quilt. So I'm taking off about 1/4 of an inch. So it's 2.25 inches. But it was in the scrap bin. I can trim it off if I want to trim it off. I like to have a little thinner bit. And then that's going to go on the front, and the front piece is folded in half lengthwise. And then that's the way that the finishing edge will be. And now I'm looking for something to put on the back. So I'll just look through this box of black and white scraps. I'm looking for something that's more black, not too much white in it. If I find a few things in there, I'm all happy, and I'll just use them. I'll stitch them together and put them on the back. Because the back of the quilt is going to be majority of black patterns, black, a bit of color maybe, but not much white, so I don't want the white bits in there. So my back strips are always 1 1/4 inches wide. So once I find enough pieces, I'll just trim them down to 1 1/4 inches, and that I can stitch them together so that I have enough bits to join the pieces together. And the back is black, and the front is going to be the color choices for the quilt. Now, referring back to the pattern, it does make a 36 by 48 wall hanging. So I've put my pieces up on the wall and look at them. And now it's time to decide how I'm going to build out the rows. Which ones of these patterns am I going to add to? Which ones, how am I going to place them there? But once I get a section sorted, then I can look at them and I can add to it. That circle pattern, it's supposed to be a Pac-Man, so I made it like Pac-Man the game, and I put an extra block in the mouth of the Pac-Man with a solid line in the middle, and that really, in the big scheme of things, it makes your eye rest on that row and travel around the quilt. And then the 4 patch of diamond shapes, I just took them apart, and I'm going to make a border all the way around the outside using that pattern as my border around there. So I can continue adding Pac-Man, and I can continue making this border. And once I get the pieces to the size that they need to be, I will quilt the section, add it to the main part, quilt another section, add it to the main part, and continue until it is finished. And once it's finished around there, all I have to do is put a binding on the outside and it's done. So I hope this gives you some inspiration. Use your colors, use everything that you've got, put it together and make something really exciting. So now I'll finish the rest of this quilt. So I'm at the last joining of 2 pieces. This piece is 92 inches long. It spans the whole side of the quilt, and the rest of the quilt is over here. It's a huge quilt, and I'm joining the last 2 pieces together with this row of sashing along here. And all I'm doing is making sure that the seam allowance is inside of my 2 1/4 inch piece on the top and 1 1/4 inch piece on the back are lying flat and even, and I can finish putting the pieces together for this quilt. It's a huge quilt, and I just need to move it around so that it doesn't pull back on me. It just needs to flow nicely, and the feed dogs, I'm not pushing, the feed dogs are pulling it through. I always stop with the needle down position. I fold this side over so that it fits nicely in the space. But that's the only amount that I would really have. And this piece is 20 inches across. So I'm folding it so that it fits neatly there and comes through. But there's a lot of, it's a lot of fluffing and folding and making sure that things are in the right places. But it's so satisfying when it's getting close to the end. I've been making this quilt for a while now, and I really am eager to finish it. I'll just have the binding. Sometimes this corner here gets caught on the tray table, but you just have to take your time with these big long joins. It's a lot easier to do these shorter ones. So if I have a little thread here, I don't want to pull it too much. I just make sure that I trim it off. Try to keep all those thread ends inside. They must add some insulation value. Almost there. Almost there. Yay, yay, yay. Isn't this a colorful quilt? I like it when it comes together. Yahoo! Little back stitch. There. I could put another row of stitching along here just to give it a bit of a flatter bit, but I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And if you see the back side, you can barely see that it's just one row of stitching straight up the side of the piece that I used as sashing back here. Yay! So now on to the binding. I'm so happy this is going to be over soon. Well, as you can see, I've finished my quilt, and I'm showing you the back side because it's important to know how this quilt as you go process develops. So the first part that I actually sewed was this part here. And on the other side, when I turn it around, I'll show you that had the round medallion and some pieces along the side. But I quilted that part all in one piece. Then, because I was going to add something at the top and the bottom of it, I added this piece down here. And so the piece of quilting that is down here was added along this sashing here. And you can't tell because I used one of the two colors of the fabric that I chose. And really you could only see a seam, but you can't tell that it's a sashing. Unlike these here and along here, I chose a color that was not one of the fabrics from either side. I chose something different. And that works out really well. So once this piece was added onto here, then I added this piece in one section, and then I added this piece over here in one section, which gave me a long and even strip. And then all I did was create this top section in one piece And the seam that I added was right here. And I did the same thing as this on the bottom and added the strip at the bottom. When I started the quilting, I did a diagonal row, but when it came time to do the parts along the outside, I just did a straight line parallel to the edge, and that created a little different effect of the quilting on the back side. So now I'll turn it around and show you the front side. All done. So here's the front side, all finished. And I'll tell you, here is the section that I did first. And that was on the back side, the gray mottled piece. Then I added this one underneath. Then I added this one to the side, and this one to the side, down to here, and across here. And finally, I created this part at the top and that part at the bottom in 2 long strips. And I tried to make it so that they looked kind of uniform and even. So these go in this direction, those go up, those go in that direction, and those go in this direction. So it creates that movement throughout the quilt. Now, it's quite a bright quilt. Not typically my colored choices, but I like it a lot. But I'm thinking of entering it in a quilt show, and I need to name it. And I'm trying to think of a suitable name for this quilt. I think something about sunglasses, or turn the lights out, it's too bright in here. So something like that. I'll come up with a name. Maybe you have a good idea for a name, but it's all fun and it's all done. I'll see you next time. I hope you have a good quilting season over this summer. See you later.